Man, it is good to be back in Hyrule. You might have noticed things look a little different since our last adventure. Link is much taller this time around. That and we're moving around a lot more like how Mario does as compared to how Link normally does. For whatever reason, following the success of the first game, instead of expanding upon that success, Nintendo decided to pull a Nintendo and did something completely different in Zelda 2. And then they wound up making something more in the style of Metroid. Although Zelda 2 certainly has its own unique flavors that's separated from Metroid, which we'll get into as we go along. Our adventure starts in North Castle, where the sleeping Zelda lies. There's nothing else here for us, so we might as well head on out. And as we exit the castle by leaving in either direction, that's not how exits work, but whatever, we enter into the Overworld, which is much different from our last adventure. This time, the Overworld acts more like how Dragon Quest's Overworld works as compared to the original Legend of Zelda, where we walk from location to location and don't have the ability to swing our sword all willy-nilly. As we're walking in the overworld, we should be safe so long as we are on paths. But if you take even one itsy-bitsy, teeny-weeny step off the path, bam! Ganon's underlings show up to cap us. If we run into one of these minions, it will bring us into an action scene where we have to fight against these fiends in hand-to-hand combat. Thankfully, we have our trusty magical sword and magical shield by our side. Otherwise, we'd probably wind up as Octorok food. Your sword can be used to hurt monsters, in case you haven't figured that out in the 3 games we've played so far, where that's a main focus. And your shield can be used to deflect projectiles. If you're at full health, you can fire a beam from your sword, which gives you a semi-solid range attack. Otherwise, you're stuck with this pitiful excuse of a stab. As you defeat monsters, you gain experience points, which will allow you to level up specific stats over time. Because for whatever reason, they thought that it would be a good idea to add RPG mechanics to their side-scrolling Zelda game. Okay, I'm just gonna rip the bandage off now. Zelda 2 is not a good game. Don't get me wrong, I love this game to death, and it's definitely in the top 200 for me, and it is by no means a bad game, but it is so flawed. There are a lot of good ideas in Zelda 2, but they were executed a bit poorly. Who in their right mind would make a Metroidvania style game where, for a vast majority of the time, this is the range of your primary attack? I'm happy they tried something different, but this is way too different. I'm not necessarily going to focus on how I would go about fixing Zelda 2, as there are plenty of videos and games that do this topic the justice it deserves. I'm just going to sit here and enjoy this flawed masterpiece for what it is, no matter how difficult it attempts to make it for me to enjoy it. Anyways, the type of encounters you can have are dependent on a couple of factors. You can either have weak encounters, as denoted by this bot-looking sprite, or you can get absolutely raked over the coals by the strong encounters, denoted by these moblin-looking sprites. Sometimes you can get lucky and get a fairy encounter, which will fully heal you. Trust me, these things can be like mana from heaven. Be grateful when they show up. Anyways, you will also have different encounters depending on what tile you're standing on. There are different monsters that stalk the fields than the ones that hide in the forests. Also, keep in mind that the path is your best friend. If you run into a monster encounter on a path, absolutely nothing happens. Anyways, as we follow the path, we are likely to come to our first town. This is the town of Rauru, and is one of several towns that dot the landscape of Hyrule. Towns are useful locations in this game, as they are filled with NPCs who can help you in your journey. You can pretty much talk with any of the villagers, and they will all have neat things to say. Just like with this guy who tells you if all else fails, use fire. What wise advice you have bestowed upon us. Somewhere in this village you will find a woman who wears all red, and she will tell you, "Please, let me help you. Come inside." Oh, I wonder if I'm about to get a puff puff, if you know what I mean. Quickly heading inside with the woman, she seductively tells us, "I can restore your life." Oh, you dirty girl. She then fully heals you. Oh, so she's just a healer. Got it. Well, needless to say, lady, you got magic hands. Anyways, before I get this video taken down from YouTube, if we talk to other villagers, they will tell us that the first palace is in Parappa Desert, which we can get to by going through a dark cave. But before we get started with the plot, we should talk to this lady in purple. Considering how, helpful? Yeah, helpful works. The last girl was, I can't wait to see what she has in store for us. She tells us that we should talk to her father before we leave town, and then beckons us to come inside. I don't like where this is going. Once we're inside, we're invited to go to the basement to talk to her father. I really don't like where this is going. And then it turns out her father is a wizard. Okay, let's get this over with. And he graciously teaches us a magic spell, which is the shield spell. Oh, thank goodness. That could have been a lot worse. Anyways, we have the ability to cast magic in this game, and when we do so, it eats up a bit of our magic meter, which we can refill by stabbing pots dropped by monsters. We are then reminded by the daughter that there are wise men in each town, so we should keep an eye out for them. The shield spell will half all damage you take, which the wizard informs you will be useful in Parappa. So, with the help of the shield spell, let's head on over to the Parappa Desert.